thank you for answering those questions. We're here to talk about you and your own story. You mentioned
Yeah.
your studies. Tell us about how you got interested in psychology to begin with, and what your practice was like, and what your schooling was like, and the things you were taught. Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I got interested in psychology in a kind of a backwards way. I actually thought I was going to be a teacher or maybe like a speech therapist. But then my aunt, she was saying like randomly one day, like maybe 5, 10 days before I had to apply for uni, she said like, I think you'd be a great psychologist. And then I was like, what? Okay, that sounds interesting. And so I looked a bit more into like, what is a psychologist? What does a psychologist do? And I was like, yeah, that could be me. And then I applied and I got in. And it's actually pretty difficult to get into psychology in Denmark. So yeah, so I was pretty lucky that I got in on my average grades and stuff. So that's what they look at on the application. And then it was kind of a bit backwards, all of it, because my interest for psychology kind of grew while I studied it. So it wasn't like I always knew that I wanted to be a therapist, or I always knew that I wanted to counsel or whatever. So it was like something that kind of emerged from actually doing the studies. And I really came to love being in uni. But yeah, I've also realized that some parts of what I've been taught is pretty skewed, in the sense that we give a lot of emphasis on the cultural part of the human being, and we kind of neglect a little bit in psychology, or not a little bit, but a lot. And that has many reasons, but one of them is feminism. But I haven't been so deep into my own studies on this red pill journey, so I'll probably be a bit on shaky ground there. But the whole thing is that we do tend to put a lot of emphasis on the culture part of the human being, and not so much on the biological parts or the evolutionary parts of who we are. And I think that is kind of missing in my education, and that's something I'm educating myself on right now, and through my whole like research journey right now. So along with a lot of other things. But yeah, so but the whole psychology studies, it's yeah, it led me to work with children. Once I graduated, I was a school psychologist for some years, and then I did a lot of counseling for parents and teachers who works with kids with all kinds of difficulties in school, but mostly, of course, ADHD and autism. And after that, I did 1.5, maybe almost 2 years in a hospital in psychiatry. So of course, I'm not prescribing any medications, but I did like the evaluations of small children, and diagnosing or helping them being diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And so that's been my professional work.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah. What was the difference, like working in a school versus working in a hospital? Were you treating a lot more like kind of acute care by the time somebody made it to the hospital?
We didn't really take so many acute situations, because they were really young, the children. So often it's not really acute, but of course there were a few that has to come to the hospital, but there was mostly the doctors who took care of that, because they're kind of the top authority there. And if there is something acute, they need to have the responsibility for that, and it won't be a psychologist on the floor like me. I would have like conversations with parents and evaluations of the child and some tests, and I'll bring all that evidence, or like all the data I've collected, to the doctor and discuss with the doctor, and then the doctor will on a conference decide on a diagnosis for the child, or no diagnosis, because sometimes we also thought that the child wasn't autistic or didn't have ADHD, so that would also be an option. So
got it. But
yeah.
Ultimately, the decision of diagnosis was up to the doctor, not necessarily you. You were just providing the assessment and your own thoughts of the case, and they would have to ultimately make the decision.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes we disagreed, right? So, but most of the times we agreed. But yeah, so I don't really disagree with the actual diagnosis of these different conditions, but I do disagree with the way that we treat them. So I think there's way more to treatment than only the interventions in the parenting style and the different strategies that you can use for the child. So I think that is very important. It's not like that. I don't want to underestimate it, because it is very important. But I also believe that it is super important that we think about nutrition, that we think about sleep, that we think about movement, that we think about being outdoors in the sun, that we think about like loads of other things, like reducing chemicals in our surroundings. And it was a bit difficult for me in the end, after turning carnivore and doing loads of research on my own, also on these subjects, and reading books by psychiatrists who work with metabolic therapies and stuff, and just still, because I'm working underneath the doctor in psychiatry, I had to give the recommendations that the doctor approve of. So I couldn't just say whatever I want. So I had to say what the doctor wants me to say. And in the end, that also felt a little not genuine for me, because it's not like I disagree with what the doctor says, but I want this whole other layer to have huge emphasis as well. And I can't say that. And even when parents say like, I really, really, I want you to tell me, is there anything that we can do? Like, I can't say, because I'm just not allowed to. And I, of course, you could say like, it should have been on me to take that discussion with my superior doctors and show them the evidence and all that. But it's just like, when you are in the system and you feel like how rigid it is, it's just like, it's not a fight that I can pick alone. Like, it's just, it has to be moved by some bigger forces also. Yeah. And also some equals, because the hospital system, even though we're really great colleagues, we aren't equals. Like, the doctor has way more authority and I have less, and it's just like a natural system there. So I can't just walk in there and say like, I think you're all wrong about like not including this, and this is so important, and it means this and that and blah blah blah. I can't do that. So in the end, like, there were so many reasons why I stopped that work, but it's mostly because I wanted to be with my children. But I have to say, like, it was difficult in the end, like not saying all these things, because when you learn it and you see it, it's hard not to tell people about it, especially if they ask you. And it's parents who are desperate, like they have really children with great disabilities and who are really impaired in life. So it's not like I'm going to say that they could be 100% cured. I don't know, maybe some can, but probably most of them can have some improvement. But most parents, honestly, who has a child who has either ADHD or autism, they'll give their right arm to have their child improve like 20%. Like, it would be huge, because otherwise, like, what you look into is like lifelong disability with, yes, maybe some improvement, but not too much, right? So it's just like, whatever else you can give those parents, you kind of want to give them that, and make that child have the best possible options in their development in life. So that's my goal. And I think if I'm going to practice psychology again, which I probably will in the future at some point, because I do like it and it is a great field to work in, but then I think I'll have my own practice, because then I'll be way more free to do like the standard stuff, and also the more, I guess, yeah, alternative, but definitely something that's a lot of studies is also starting to point at, that it actually works to some degree. Like, sure, some kids don't get the greatest effect, but some kids also get really great effects. And it's just like, why wouldn't we try it?